Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today, I will be welcoming back stand-up comedy legend Tom Dreesen, and we're going to be talking about, he has a one-man show going on in Los Angeles. He's going to be doing a performance of it next week in LA, and I have him back on the show today to talk about that. It's about Frank Sinatra, who was a friend and a mentor to him for many years, and I can't wait. I love having Tom Dreesen on the show, talk about stories about Sinatra, the Comedy Store strike, and all that stuff. He's a great storyteller, and he's the man who is responsible for comedians getting paid today. So yeah, here is my new interview with Tom Dreesen. Hey Tom, it's Tommy Kovac.
Oh hey Tommy, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you today, sir?
I'm fine.
Welcome back. So you got this one-man show going on in Los Angeles?
Yes, I'm doing it, and I've been doing it around the country for years. It's called An Evening of Laughter and Stories of Sinatra. It's just a 90-minute retrospective of my life, actually. It's where the theater goes dark and a screen on the stage, and there's a screen on the stage and a video narrated by Dennis Farina. It's about 3.5 minutes of my life, and it's a film of my life, and then I walk out. He introduces me from the screen, and I walk out, and I do stand-up comedy for 25, 30 minutes, and then I segue over to a bar that's on the stage that has a bottle of Jack Daniels on it, because that was Frank's drink of choice, and I tell a funny story at the bar, and then when the audience laughs, all the lights go out, and Frank's Sinatra's on the screen singing, you know, a saloon song. It's 2:45, there's no one in the place except you and me. And I wait till he gets to the chorus, make it one for my baby and one more for the road. And then he goes off screen and the spotlight hits me, and I'm in a bar. Mm-hmm. I've come home, and the audience is in a bar with me. So I tell them the first time I heard that voice, I was 8 years old, shining shoes in a bar in Harvey, Illinois. And he was on the jukebox, and then I take the audience from that little boy hearing Sinatra on the jukebox in Harvey, Illinois, to one day carrying his coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills, California. So I take them on that journey, and as I'm telling stories, pictures are coming on the screen authenticating the stories, as well as video of Frank and I. And it's fun. It's laughs, 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 laughs. But then I take them to the funeral and actually have them in tears, and then I turn right around and do a closing monologue and have them laughing again. And then I end it by toasting them all with the Jack Daniels and saying, I wish for all of you what Frank Sinatra wished for you. The very last song that he ever sang on stage is that the best is yet to come. So I said, good night, everybody, and Frank is singing, the best is yet to come, as they're leaving the theater. And that's the show.
Wow, that sounds like not only a very moving portrait of Frank, it also sounds like a very unique show. I don't think I've ever heard of a one-man show like that ever.
It's exciting for me to do. I've always thought that a good comedian could make you laugh for an hour and a half. But a great comedian can make you laugh and cry. And I had only seen two people do that, and it was Richard Pryor and Red Skelton, where they could have you laughing, and then take you to a place where where tears are coming down your eyes, but then turn right around and have you laughing again. Most comedians would never do that, because once you get an audience on a roll, you don't want to ditch them and go somewhere else. But it's a challenge, and I enjoy that challenge. I've been doing it for a few years around the country. I'm doing it August 17th in Valparaiso, Indiana, at the Memorial Opera House. And then I go come back here. I go around the country, but I'm doing it in Hollywood, California. In November, there's a VFW hall on Highland Avenue. And on November 16th, they have a theater inside the VFW hall, a state-of-the-art theater. And so seats about 420 on November 16th. I'm going to do my one-man show for the Gary Sinise Foundation. Mm-hmm. I'm going to invite all of our veterans and all of our servicemen, past and present, there. So it's going to be a fun night.
Oh, wonderful! So you've been doing this for a lot of years now. This one-man show.
Yeah, I've been doing it for about 5 years, and it's because, everywhere I went after Frank Sinatra died, I toured with him for 14 years, in 45, 50 cities a year, and had this great friendship with him. And but after he passed away, and even when he was alive, everywhere I went, every show I did, they would want to know about Frank Sinatra. Tell me a Frank Sinatra story, or what was Frank like, and so forth and so on. Mm-hmm. So I decided to put it into a 90-minute one-man show. But it also is just a total retrospective of my life. When I sit down at the bar to talk to people, I also go back to my childhood, into growing up in Harvey, Illinois, and my 8 brothers and sisters living in a shack, how I shined shoes in taverns, had friends in bowling alleys, caddied in the summer, sold newspapers on the corner to feed my brothers and sisters. I take them to those years to going into the military. I take the audience for my years in the service, and then coming out of the service and meeting Tim Reed and becoming America's first black and white comedy team. Mm-hmm. And history shows we were the last. I go through that with pictures and as I'm telling stories, funny stories, and then to when the team split up, and my journey out to the West Coast and trying to get on the Tonight Show, working at the Comedy Store, and finally getting on the Tonight Show, and eventually doing 61 appearances on the Tonight Show, and how that led me to Sammy Davis Jr., to touring with Smokey Robinson, touring with Gladys Knight and Phipps, Natalie Cole, Liza Minnelli, and finally to be with Frank Sinatra. So I take them on that journey. It's a fun journey, and I enjoy doing it.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And how long was the writing process for this show before you started doing it?
It took a while, because I started out doing it differently, and as it evolved, at first I was going to do it strictly dramatic. I've acted, I studied mm-hmm. acting in Chicago, and I've studied acting out here in Los Angeles, mm-hmm. and I've done some film, I've done TV shows, and I wanted to do it as more of a dramatic piece, and I did it for a while, but then I realized that I'm a stand-up comedian first, last, and always. That's what I've been doing. This is my 50th year in show business, and I knew that I had to inject more stand-up into it. So it was stand-up and its stories, and it's far more fun. But it took me a couple of years to develop it the way I wanted to develop it. It was a work in progress. But today I've got it honed in good. But even every time I do it, I find something new, another nugget in there where I could go. Because once you're on stage and you break that fourth wall, mm-hmm. and you get a stream of consciousness going. When you go in there into that subconscious mind and you get a stream of consciousness, sometimes things pop up that are solid gold. And if you feel the emotion, you go with it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Wow, that sounds like it's going to be a great show. Something I wanted to ask you about that I forgot to ask you about last time we talked. You were on a couple of Dean Martin celebrity roasts.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I did one with the Dan Haggerty, the Grizzly Adams. He was on an NBC show, so I mm-hmm. was on that roast, and I did another one for George Burns, who I really like him. I got to know him a little bit, and I really enjoyed doing the roast for him.
Yeah, I love those Dean Martin roasts. I mean, he did them for 10 years, and then it got to a point where they kind of got repetitive, and they started repeating jokes and stuff like that. But they were pretty damn funny. I mean, now you see roasts nowadays, and they're just really vulgar and just, really mean and insulting. But back then, it was just really pure.
Yeah, I say the same thing. When I watch the way they roast now, it's the filthiest, most vile, disgusting material sometimes. But, that's a sign of the times. When I started out in show business, you couldn't say hell or damn on TV.
Right.
And today, when cable television came along, see, network television, when you did the Tonight Show, you had to work clean. You had to come up with 6-minute original monologues. Each time you did it, a new 6 minutes, and it couldn't be two guys going to a bar jokes. It had to be original monologues. And, of course, you couldn't be blue, and for those who are listening to your show, in comedy, when you say he works blue, means he works, he curses, he swear words,
right.
or vulgar material, But that's a sign of the times. Young kids today, sadly, have never seen a Jack Benny live or a Bob Hope live or a George Burns live or Phyllis Diller or comedians like that live. They go today to comedy clubs and they think that saying the F word every 5 seconds is comedy.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story, Tommy. I was at the Laugh Factory trying out some new material one night.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I told you this the last time we talked, but I was looking at my notes. I was upstairs getting ready to go on. 2 young comedians were around the corner, and they didn't know I was there. And they were talking, and I heard one of them say to the other one, Tom Dreesen's here tonight. The other comedian said, oh, yeah, he's old school. And the other kid said, he's old school. What do you mean? He said, well, he doesn't use the F word. The other comedian said, he doesn't use the F word. What does he use for adjectives? And I stuck my head around the corner, and I said, adjectives.
That's
what
one.
I use for adjectives.
That's a good one. Yeah, and also too, back in those days when you were doing the roast, pretty much everybody knew everybody. Now it's like everyone's roasting people they don't even know, and that's what's so mean about it.
Yeah, it's a different time. I always say there's only one rule in comedy: be funny.
Mm-hmm.
Only rule. Now, you're not going to be funny for everybody. No one is. You're going to pick up critics along the way, but you're going to pick up a following, And you can't outgross me. You can't gross me out. I mean, I'm a street guy. I don't have a degree from academia, but I got a doctorate from the streets. I grew up on the streets. I spent 4 years in the military. So if you're going to try to, think you're going to gross me out, you're not. It's just that it isn't clever material to me sometimes. It's harder to write. Let me digress. Young comedians say to me all the time, can you give me some advice? I'm just starting out. I say, yeah, write your first hour clean. Try that. Challenge yourself. Mm-hmm. Challenge yourself to say, if you had to go before corporate America tomorrow, and corporate America is going to hire you and pay you a lot of money, but they want you to work clean for their employees and for their clients. Could you write 1 hour, make that your challenge to write 1 hour of clean comedy. After that, if you don't like it and you want to go blue, fine. Find yourself on stage and go for it. But challenge yourself to write 1 hour of clean material, because it's not easy. It's very difficult to write stuff that could make grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and the kids laugh, as we had to do on the Tonight Show.
Mm-hmm. I know. I met Rob Schneider a couple of years ago. He told me that when he first got booked for Letterman, he had a solid 5 minutes already. That took him like a year to write, but it was blue. And then he had, say like 6 weeks to write a solid 5 minutes that wasn't blue for Letterman. And he said it was very challenging. And then it was maybe a year before he did his second appearance. And then he had a year to write a much tighter and much more, much better 5 minutes that was clean.
Sure. Who'd you say that was? I'm sorry.
Rob Schneider.
Oh, Rob Schneider. Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, it's you can work, it just depends what you want to do as a stand-up comedian. It's the greatest profession on the planet, bar none.
Yes.
You who can make people laugh, So, if they did a survey many years ago around the country of the insurance companies of America did a survey of the 10 fears of man. It took them 8 years to complete this survey all over the world. The 10 fears of man. Death was fourth. Pain was second. Getting up in front of an audience was the number one fear of mankind. So if you can get up in front of an audience as a house painter or a lawyer or a grocery clerk, and you can discuss something for 1 hour about your profession, about your life, to an audience for 1 hour, you're in less than 1% of the population of the world. If you can get up and make people laugh for 1 hour, you're in less than 1/1,000,000th of 1% of the population of the world. That's how unique you are. So that's when I tell young comedians, it's the greatest profession on the planet, because you're making people healthy. You're making people healthy for laughter is psychologically a deterrent. If you've got problems on your mind,
mm-hmm.
you're going to watch a comedian, and he or she makes you laugh. It's a deterrent, a psychological deterrent from your problems. Now UCLA did research, and they found that laughter, when the human body laughs, that endorphins are released from the brain into the bloodstream. So that sense of well-being you get after a hearty laugh, tears are rolling down your eyes, and
mm-hmm.
you finish laughing, you go, oh, and this sense of well-being comes over your body, it's because your body's gone through an actual chemical change. So laughter is also physiologically therapeutic. It's psychologically a deterrent and physiologically therapeutic. Therefore, comedians are physicians of the soul. You make people laugh. You make them healthy for having your service. So it's your choice in the beginning of your career. How do you want to do this? Do you want to do you want to hey, do you want to wear blue all of your life and work comedy clubs for the most part of your life? And if you get real lucky and you get hot, you could maybe do a series on cable, and you can work a series of hour-long shows where you can work as blue as you want. You might pick up a real good following. There's comics that have done that and gone on to greater things, film and sitcoms. But if you're going to be a journeyman comedian and you're going to just work comedy clubs all of your life, you're limited in the amount of money you can make. And that's okay if that's what you want to do. Or you can also go into corporate work where you get, I MC corporate events and I do stand-up comedy at, for Allstate, for AT&T, for IBM, for big companies, and they pay a whole lot more money than with those comedy clubs. You can make more money for one corporate appearance than you could be working 4 months in comedy clubs around the country for one night. So you have to choose as a stand-up comedian which way you want to go, what you see yourself as, and then go for it.
Right. And either way, comedy is healing is basically what you're saying.
Yes, that's why I say it's the greatest profession on the planet. Anytime your job is a service to humanity, anytime people are better off for having seen you, coming to you and whatever profession you're in, if you're a doctor, a driver, a truck driver, a bricklayer, a bartender, if people leave you better off than when they saw you, then you're in a great profession because it's service to humanity. And I can't think of a better profession on the planet than stand-up comedy. And that's why I give motivation speeches at universities all over the country on 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. I do that for corporate America too, but I do it free for stand-up comedians. It's called The Joy of Stand-Up Comedy and How to Get There. I encourage them that you're in the greatest profession on the planet. Don't destroy that with drugs and alcohol. I've known 5 comedians who committed suicide in my life, 5 real good comedians. And I've also known 20 to 25 comedians who destroyed their lives with drugs and alcohol and died from that. So I teach them, I try to motivate them that you're on the greatest profession on the planet. Don't destroy that gift that you have. Very few people can do what you do. Don't destroy that God-given gift you had that you work so hard to develop yourself as a marketable act. Don't destroy that with drugs and alcohol.
Oh, that is beautiful, Tom. That is so beautiful. This year is the 40th anniversary of the Comedy Store strike. Does it ever cease to amaze you that people are still talking about it and asking you about it?
No, it doesn't, and it's a part of my life that sometimes I wish I could forget. But, there was a great book called "I'm Dying Up Here" by William Needleseater,
right?
And that chronicles that era and what happened, and how I got involved and was thrown to the forefront of that. But it's still a problem to this day. People, there's comics out there. I just read an article of how comedians today are just struggling to get rent money. They're alive in this business. And it's because there are far more comedians today. In I think it was in the early 70s, Steve Allen wrote a book called Funny People. And in it, he said there were like 150 comedians in America making a living as stand-up comedy. And that was counting comedy teams and stand-ups. Of about 600 who were trying to make a living, only 150 were making a living. Today, there might be 20,000 comedians in America. I mean, there were no comedy clubs when I started out in show business. Today, there's over 550 of them. The clubs all over the country, and they have to fill those slots. They don't pay a great deal, but so there's a lot more applying for that position, 15 to 20,000. So, I joke that when I started out, people would say, "What do you do for a living?" You say, "I'm a stand-up comedian." They go, "Wow, Martha, honey, come here. He's a stand-up comedian. today people say, what do you do for a living? You say, I'm a stand-up comedian. They say, yeah, so is my dentist. He does it on the weekends, you know. My chiropractor is also a stand-up comedian. My wife's gynecologist does stand-up over at Crackers. And
that's a good one.
Everybody's a stand-up comedian today, you know.
Yeah. I was listening to that wonderful interview you just did on Mark Maron's podcast, and you mentioned on there that when you went back to the Comedy Store for the first time in 40 years, all the young comedians were thanking you for enabling comedians to make money.
Yeah, and I was touched by that, you know, that that they had even knowledge of it, you know, of what went on, because it was a tough time in 1979. I was on you know, I was making money. I'd already done the Tonight shows. I was touring with Sammy Davis Jr. I'm working Vegas, Tahoe, Reno, Atlantic City. I'm doing corporate dates. I was making six figures, you know, doing real well. And I came back to try out some new material at the Comedy Store on the weekends, like we always did when I came back off the road. And, you know, and that's when it all began. The comics were grousing about not getting paid. And I went to a couple meetings, and they just kept, you know, as you heard me tell this story, that everybody was talking at the same time, and they were getting nothing done, and then except they were going to have another meeting. And so I went to the next meeting, and the same thing was going on. So I finally started sharing the meetings. I had background in the JCs, the Junior Chamber of Commerce back in Illinois, so I knew how to conduct a meeting, knew Robert's Rules of Order and how to hold meetings and how to get things done. So I just started organizing them as a favor. I'm going back on the road. I'm going to go back to where I'm making money, but I started organizing them, and because I thought they should be paid. You know, if you're going to charge at the door to see the entertainment, let the entertainment have some of that money, and you know, and so I started helping organize them. But next thing you know, I was thrown to the forefront. It lasted 8 weeks. It was just brutal. It was just a real tough time, and I turned down $50,000 worth of work with Sammy Davis Jr. To stay, because once I got in a fight, I wanted to win, and we finally got it resolved. It would have been over in 1 day, in 24 hours, but 19 comedians crossed the picket line, 18 guys and one girl. If they would have united and stayed together with the other comedians, it would have been over in 24 hours. But because they crossed it lasted for 8 weeks, and ended up with a kid committing suicide and just a lot of stuff that I wish had never happened. But
yeah,
in the end, the comics got paid, and comedians started getting paid all around the country a little bit more. So it was well worth it. But they were getting zero. That's the hard part. It wasn't like they wanted more money. They weren't getting any money. They were getting zero. And the Comedy Show was making millions of dollars a year, and I just thought they should charge $1 more at the door and let the comedians have that $1 to split. If 200 people showed up that night, the comedians split $200. And if 100 people showed up, they split $100. And it took 8 weeks to get that finally to win that battle. And today the irony is 40 years later, we went on strike for $25 a set. $25 a set. Okay? Today they're getting $12.50 in the original room at the Comedy Store, and the improvisation is paying like $7.50. It went backwards. The Laugh Factory, Jimmy Masada, is far more generous. He pays the comedians $85 a set, and with the Long Beach, they get $125 a set. So that's a quantum leap from what the other clubs are paying you.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. $85 a set. That's very rare now.
Yeah.
Next month, you're going to be hitting a milestone birthday. How do you feel about that?
I don't talk about that to anybody, but it's funny. I'm 79 years old. I've been in show business 50 years. September I'll be 80 years old, and the reason why I laugh at that is because I play golf 7 straight days in a row. I work out. And when I finish with you, I'll go into the gym and work out. I feel like, Satchel Paige, great old baseball player many years ago, said, "How old would you be if no one ever told you how old you were?" So I always say I'm 38 because I feel 38, and I still do things that I did at 38. Not everything, but a lot of things, and so I think that because I love my work and I love life, that my spirit is maybe 38 years old.
Absolutely, that's a great way to look at it. I mean, if you're still working out at your age, I mean, that means you have boundless energy.
One thing I've always had was real good energy. Anytime I've had setbacks in life, I recover from them pretty good. Because again, I'm a motivational speaker, and I have to practice what I preach as well. I mean, stand-up comedy is who I am. I am a stand-up comedian first, last, and always. That's really the first time I ever went on stage, and I got a laugh with something I had written. It was like an epiphany, like the dark clouds opened up, like an old B movie. Like the dark clouds opened up and the sun burst through, and I was on stage, and I went, yeah, this is what I want to do. It was a Friday night, and I got that laugh the first time I went on the stage. I couldn't sleep that whole night. I got up the next day, and I went to church, Ascension Church in Harvey, Illinois, where I was an altar boy when I was a kid, and where I sang in the choir. Mm-hmm. There was no one in the church. It was a Saturday morning. And I got down on my knees, and I prayed. I said, God, I found it. I know what I want to do. I want to be a stand-up comedian. Oh, God, if you could let me, I was praying, if you'd let me make my living as a stand-up comedian, I'll never ask for anything else. I'll do charity work. I was making all these promises, because the thought that you could make a living as a stand-up comedian, but that you could make a living making people laugh, overwhelmed me. I never thought that I would be in this kind of a profession. And I prayed. Now, ironically, that was 50 years ago in September. Mm-hmm. Going back to that church this September, and I'm going to at the 10:30 Mass on a Sunday. I'm going to testify. My talk will be called "The Power of Prayer," and it will be how it changed my life, the power of prayer. And I'll show them the spot where I knelt 50 years ago and asked God, please, let me make my living as a stand-up comedian. That prayer was answered. I've been doing it for 50 years.
That is beautiful, Tom. Just beautiful. And you've lived a very blessed life, I have to say.
Yes, I have. In the book that Tim and I wrote, Tim and Tom, An American Comedy in Black and White, I say in that book that the first half of my life, it was like God said, I'm going to put a load on you, a real load on your shoulders. But if you survive, the second half is on me. And the second half has been on him, because I've gone places I never thought I'd go, people I never thought I'd meet, and so many great lessons that I learned along the way.
Beautiful.
And then, like Frank's saying, the best is yet to come.
Absolutely. The best is yet to come my way.
Yeah, right.
So Saturday, August 17th at the Memorial Opera House.
In Valparaiso, Indiana.
In Indiana. And I
think there's only a few tickets left, really, because they told me the other day that they're getting real close to selling out.
Oh, that's great.
That area.
That's great. I hope it's a huge success for you, Tom, and I hope the rest of the shows that you end up doing are hugely successful. And I thank you for coming back on again today.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. You have yourself a great day, Tom.
Okay, Tommy. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Tom Dreesen. Wonderful man, insightful man, funny man. If you like this video, everyone, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, add me as a friend on Facebook, join my Tommy Kovac comedian page on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and all that fun stuff. Well, that's all the time we have this week on Splat from the Past. Until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying, there's no shame in living in the past, because the present sucks. Later, dudes.